um, asked Desiree and Amber to help me put this together because they keep saying that they're not quite anymore, but they are close to the millennials, the closest ones that I knew that could do this. And as mayor, I want to work with everyone in the city, and I want to hear from everyone in the city. I might be, as I shared with Desiree and Amber, and they said I should share it here. Um, some people might say, oh, she's old, but I want to correct that. I'm not old, I'm seasoned. And I'm seasoned with wisdom and experience and understanding that was bought and paid for. And I need you, and you need me. As young people, you have the energy, you have the legs that you can get out and you can run and go, and you have ideas and you have some dreams. I'm at a place where I have visions, but together we can do something. We can make Ypsilanti a very flourishing city. I can't do it by myself, and neither can you do it by yourself. It's going to take us working together. And I hope to hear from you tonight. What I want to hear is I want to hear your dreams, your thoughts, your ideas for making Ypsilanti a grand city. I said, I think right after I was mayor, and someone asked me, and I said, I don't like the word great anymore. Great has been overused and stretched out to where its meaning has been diluted. So I want to see us have a grand city, a city where everybody has equal opportunity. We have equity across the board, where every business has the opportunity to flourish, where our children are safe, our adults are safe, our seniors are safe. And I need your help to get it done. But I know that working together with you, even with our teenagers, if all of us work together, and our seasoned people are and all of the different age groups, what do they call them? The mom and pops. That's not what they call them anymore. But the baby boomers, that whole group, we all have to work together. And if we work together, we can do something. We can put Ypsilanti on the map so that people will want to come here to see, hey, what did they do? And it'll be because we all work together, not because one group did it or another group did it, but we can do it together. So with all that, I'm going to turn it over to Desiree and Amber. Go, girls.
Lois, very much for the introduction, and thank you for being a representative of the seasoned generation here tonight. And I just want to note that Desiree and I are definitely millennials. We're just on the older end of it. So thank you so much. My name is Amber Fellows, and I am a 17-year resident of Ypsi. My pronouns are any and all of them, and I am 37 years old. This town hall is by millennials, for millennials, and that Desiree and myself are going to help facilitate. And to encourage fluid conversation tonight, this will be an open dialogue instead of a strict agenda. Please share what matters to you and what your concerns and visions are for the city. If you want to add or respond to something or someone speaking or talking about something else, that is all good. Just click the raise your hand button. It's under participants. If you click participants, you can raise your hand. We will try to be taking stack, which just means that when you raise your hand, we'll put you in a queue and we'll call on you. Of course, like some people might want to directly respond and it might not work perfectly, but we'll do our best. And then after that, I'm going to turn it to Des.
Hi, thanks for that, Amber. So I am Desiree Simmons. I am a 6th-year resident of Ypsilanti and of Michigan overall. And I am 2 days younger than Amber. So, uh, and I am married and I have a 3.5-year-old child. So, uh, they keep me busy. Uh, so for this session, we're centering voices of our millennial residents, meaning folks we were looking at born between 1981 to 2000. We'll go through. And so we encourage underrepresented millennials such as Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, and other non-men to speak up. Those who are in attendance, we know we have a lot of folks who are here who are not millennials. Thank you for coming. We see this as a great opportunity for you to be able to hear about these issues as millennials experience them, and we hope that you will that will help to add to your perspective, and that then as we are in spaces to work in coalition together, that we can kind of start from that space. We also imagine that there could be more of these town halls as well for different generational groups because we think generational learning is so important. So the way we're going to go through this is we'll kind of start off with a couple of topics at a time. We'll introduce the topics, but that is really a free-flowing dialogue. So what folks want to talk about most will be what we will focus on most. So if we don't get through all of the topics, that's not important. And it would just be helpful that when you speak, just to say your name just as an intro to the whole group.
Should we do next?
Yeah.
So why this town hall is important, we want to just like illustrate with just a couple quick facts, and we'll just bring up one right now. So it might be surprising to some people in the room to believe, but 50% of the population in Ypsi are millennials, and by far the largest generation in town. The median age in Ypsi is 24.2 years. And with that, Des, if you can introduce our topics. You are muted.
Great, thanks. So our first two topics that we're going to start with are racial justice and healing and restoration and transformation. And so for racial justice, this could be, I mean, whatever you might want, but just a couple of thoughts are Black Lives Matter, systemic racism, thinking about what this looks like in political power, healing, restoration, and transformation. This could cover things like Water Street, reparations, environmental remediation, city budgeting, addressing harm, and accountability. So who would like to start us off?
I'm not seeing any hands yet. Someone could just jump in right away. Laurent?
Hi there. My name is Laurent. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I just had a question about the statistics of the age of Ipsy. Is that including or not including like students who solely live on EMU's campus? Because I know that like having a school around you can really unbalance that of like, do we know the age of Ipsy residents that are Ipsy residents, not EMU students? This is coming from like somebody who just graduated from Eastern, so no slight on them.
Yeah, first I want to say that, you know, definitely students of Ypsilanti are residents of the town too. And I think in the past there's been efforts to kind of dismiss them as being relevant. So I don't want to do that here. That data comes from the American Community Survey of 2018, which is something the census does. And so it's the age group that encompasses millennials is about 50% of the town.
Okay, thank you.
I see Lamar.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Lamar Weir. I work in Congresswoman Dingell's office, and one just want to say, thank you for hosting this space. And then my comment really is, it's interesting that I'm originally born and raised in Detroit, but since now working in this community, seeing the similarities of the displacement of a lot of Black individuals, and seeing like the same struggles that I had in Detroit, people in Ypsilanti, and just not in Washington County overall are also having. So happy to be a part of the conversation and the continuous efforts to raise and help the Black community.
Thank you.
Brian, were you wanting to say something?
Yeah, I guess on the topic of race in Ypsilanti, I would say that for my family's history, it's been well, it started out as a haven. Actually, my second great grandparents moved here when some folks burned some crosses on their yard in Blissfield, which is near Adrian, because she was Danish and he was Black and indigenous. And so obviously it has its problems, and it always has. But I think that's another part of the history, and I think we should, I don't know what can be done to kind of revive it, but maybe we should focus on some of the positive things that we're about and really reinforce those and try to strengthen those and build on them. Yeah, I guess that's been sort of my family's experience. But on the other hand, I grew up on the South Side, and part of the reason that we put 734 Brewing where it is because, it wasn't until I was a junior in high school, I think, that I actually had a meal in Depot Town. It just was not a thing that anyone from my neighborhood did. And that was before a school dance or something like that. So there are a lot of layers, and there's a lot of unpacking to do with respect to race in this town in particular. But I'd say on the whole, this is a good place to do that kind of work. I think most folks are open to it and interested in it. So not a very coherent thought, but I'm just kind of spitting it out here.
No, thank you. Well, I think one of the things that just to kind of name out is that you're talking about in lots of ways the segregation of the city in one way, and also the history of how it was a space to draw. It was a draw for people who were also looking for safe, equitable living too.
Thanks for sharing. If anybody just has a response or something to add, you can just speak up at this time. There's no raised hands.
Well, will there be is there equal pay? I know there's a Black Lives Matter march too long ago, and my mom and I thought to myself, what was that, what was that about? And it was right at the library downtown.
Is that a question about the action that was in town?
Yes, yes.
Does anybody want to answer that? To my understanding, there's been at least 4 organized actions in downtown Ypsilanti from different organizers. Terrell Gucci Cotton has organized 3 protests so far. And there's been some other actions that were organized by other people. One person is a 21-year-old. I can't remember her name right now.
Ayana Bennett. Yeah, Ayana Bennett did the one that was on in June.
So I know that, so under healing, restoration, and transformation, which I know the Lois, the mayor, is quite interested in talking about. One of the things I know a lot of people are interested in town is Water Street. Does anybody here have kind of a perspective, like a generational perspective on what we should do, as we are going to be inheriting kind of the project of Water Street?
Well, I think
This is a quiet group.
Brian,
I think it needs to, yeah, I think it needs to be, well, it needs to be sold, obviously. I mean, it can't stay off the tax rolls forever. We live in a city where 39% of the city is not taxed because it's a university, and the city and other nonprofits and things own a lot of other land that could otherwise be taxed, and it only hurts our schools and the library and other institutions that depend on those dollars to sustain themselves, especially now with, YCS losing a school. Well, it's not totally lost, but, there's significant fire damage over the last couple of weeks. So it does need to be used. But how, I guess, is sort of up to whoever wants to buy it. But I think some movement needs to be made to have it put to good use and then generate tax revenue, because I don't know how much longer our schools and other institutions can really manage with the funds that they're getting.
Quick question. Could you give a little context about what Water Street is?
does anybody want to take that on?
When I was a kid, it was I think it was a factory of some sort of manufacturing facility, and also the flea market was there. I guess the improvements on the land fell into disrepair, and from what I understand, the city purchased it through a bond, and I think Ms. Lois can probably correct me if I'm wrong there. And now it's a parcel for sale, awaiting someone with deep enough pockets to actually develop it into something useful. I will say, as someone in the real estate industry, a parcel that size, to find one developer that's going to do something that's actually worth doing, it's going to be extremely expensive. I guess that's sort of the history of it. It's basically a vacant parcel that's now owned by the city. And it's about 40 acres.
I think it's, I don't know if maybe I missed it, but just to also say that it was left contaminated by those businesses, so those corporations left it. And so now it's designated as a brownfield, which means that in order for a lot of things to go there, needs to be made. And so that's one of the things that help to add to the expense.
I saw Laurent's hand up at some point.
I was basically going to ask the same thing as Lamar about the history of Water Street, because I like know some of it and some of the controversies, but I know that there's been a lot of projects proposed and none of them have gone through for like a large variety of reasons. So do you know if there's anything like the city specifically wants to do, or anything you, Amber, or Desiree have a vision for, so we have like kind of a jumping off idea?
Desiree, you want to take that on?
I just, you said, oh, do you have any idea? I got stuck there. I was like, yes, there's so many ideas. The first part of the question was about just what had been happening before. Was that just so I can?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, kind of like what are the projects that have been proposed, a brief overview, like what's happened with those, and if you have an idea so that the group has something to like start off on.
Yeah, I mean, I could try to. I mean, and I'll definitely need some of these things that happened before I was here. But I think, you know, at the time when the city purchased the property, there was actually a developer that was in mind and had street plans, had been developing land around Michigan. So, but then the 2008 crisis hit, and that developer pulled out, and so that's one thing. There was going to be, I think, a boys and girls club or some kind of community center, something there. Is that right, Lois?
Yes, the original plan was the developer was going to build mixed housing there, and it was gonna have a business front that would have flowed right in with the rest of downtown. And once the developer found out that the land was as dirty as it was, they pulled out immediately, really leaving the city quite in a lurch. And then, as Desiree said, the recession of '08 hit, and we couldn't get anyone interested. And the community center that she's talking about, the county came to us, the county commissioner at that time, Mr. Sizemore. He came and he wanted to do something on the east side of the county, and we worked with the county. The city did everything that we were asked, and it was supposed to be a large community center there, and it was going to be built in conjunction with the Y. The Y would run it, and I was here very involved with it, but I cannot say exactly what happened. All I know is one day everybody was excited about it. We had gone to charrettes where we had picked out what we wanted the center to look like, and then the next day the whole deal was gone. So and I can't exactly say what happened to it. And that was the last major thing that we have really talked about putting there, and that was really quite disappointing. So
The Water Street Flats, which was proposed.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
More affordable housing development.
Right.
That also didn't work out. Yeah, but I always love that Lois points out that Ypsilanti's fire people on their wages could not afford to live at Water Street Flats if it were built, so it wasn't exactly affordable to our community.
Yeah, there's an issue with how that's calculated, and because a lot of it's based on the county income, and Ypsi falls far short of that. It's actually a similar situation for Detroit and Wayne County.
Mhm.
The rule is it's based on a third of the average wage. What the maximum rent can be for affordable housing by HUD standards. On the low end, you can have what's called a small area market rent, which can only go down to 90% of that number. The problem is in Ypsi is that the incomes are more than 10% different than the ones in Ann Arbor and Saline and Chelsea and Dexter. So if someone's going to use that rule for affordable housing, the chances of affordable housing that's affordable for Ypsi being built there outside of some dramatic increase in the incomes of people who live in Ypsi is going to be pretty slim.
Yeah, and that's something that is happening around the state. So that folks see, and there's some movement to do something about that locally as well.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to happen at the federal level because HUD sets those rates.
Laurent, did you have something to add?
Sorry, my name's Emmett. I'm also here. I was wondering if I'm not super knowledgeable on it, but do any of you know the like indigenous context? Because I know that, I mean, all of Ypsi is indigenous land, but I mean, all of everywhere is, but specifically, I remember hearing something about like that land being, I guess, like contested as far as like should it belong to the city or should it be given back to the indigenous people in the area, and I was wondering if anybody else had more knowledge or better context for that.
There is significant evidence to suggest that there are like indigenous burial grounds there over the last century. There's been remains found. So that is something that is not talked about as much as it should be. I'm glad you're raising that issue. But yes, the answer is yes. There's definitely grounds there. And I think what has been discussed in the past is developers say that once they find those like burial grounds that they'll stop building in that spot. But it seems, it didn't seem very clear to me at least about how that process would work. So we haven't really tested what it would be like yet. And
Okay.
so there's time to think about this through more before that happens.
Yeah, that's fair, especially if there's not a whole lot being done with it. There's plenty of time. I think that would also be like we were talking about like suggestions of specifically getting like community indigenous leaders and their input on like what they would do with it or want done with it, especially if it has like significant importance for them.
Yeah, so my family's part indigenous. Some are Anishinaabe, but we're not from this part of the state. And you know, there just aren't a ton of Anishinaabe people around here, and I honestly don't think it's like a huge concern. But I would say. Talking to someone from one of the nearest bands would be a good idea. But the likelihood that anyone's going to want anything that comes from that contaminated soil is going to be pretty low, unless it's something like really significant, like like human remains.
I believe the thought that there's a Potawatomi grounds here as well.
Yeah, Potawatomi are Anishinaabe.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody else? Bring in some new voices. I'm gonna start calling on people. See people I know. Constance.
Do we want to bring in more topics too?
Please.
So just we have a couple more topics too. So we have community participation and trust. So this is thinking about local government, grassroots activism, electoralism, and then the punishment and carceral system, thinking about policing, the local police budget, school to prison pipeline, crimes of poverty, homelessness, substance use, ticketing, paraphernalia. Do you want to share another couple of stats, Amber?
Sure. One that's relevant. Let's see. Millennials are more diverse, more racially diverse generation than the previous generations, and also known as the brokest generation. So as of the first quarter of 2020, we are the largest generation in the country while having by far the least amount of wealth. When boomers were roughly the same age as we are now, they owned about 21% of the country's wealth compared to millennials' 3% of the share today. A pretty dramatic difference. We have 2 members of city council of 7 that are millennials, which is really cool. But it is somewhat underrepresentative of our population since we make up 50% of the city.
So yeah, any thoughts on those topics or any others?
Were we talking about policing?
Mm-hmm.
Was that one of the options?
Yes.
Yeah, I did have some. I did have some concerns. On 2 occasions, I've had 2 occasions to chat with police officers in the last few months. One was when a car drove literally inside my office, and had the governor not shut us down, I'd probably be dead. And the guy that was here, they're very young, I will say that, and that's sort of an issue, depending on what the percentage of youthful officers is. They were heading out, and the guy says, "Do you own the building?" We didn't know who to contact. And I thought, well, that's a problem because this is a business, and there's literally a phone number on the front door. So that kind of concerned me. And I think a lot of that can be just sort of chalked up to inexperience, or I don't know. But on a second occasion, the car smashed into a tree on the property next to my house, and it took them several days to get out there. And when the guy finally got out, he was sort of out of it, and he explained that he was at the end of a 16-hour shift. And also, he looked young, like 20s. My concern is that I don't think anyone working a 16-hour shift should have a gun, and probably should not be in a position to make life or death decisions after what's essentially 2 days work in a day. It doesn't seem fair to them, and it certainly doesn't seem safe to anyone else in the community. And I am really concerned about the ratio of inexperienced officers. Now, obviously experience comes with its own pitfalls, but so I don't know how we solve that, but it's a definite concern for me. And it's kind of frightening to have someone on a 16-hour shift with a gun.
Thanks for that. Other folks? Shayna.
Hi, I'm Shayna Shome. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I've lived here in Ypsi for about 5 years with my husband, and we have a 6-month-old son who hopefully won't wake up while I'm talking. So I am really grateful for this space, and I'm really excited for our new mayor and other new elected officials. I feel passionate, but don't have a whole lot of specifics tonight. But I did want to say in this issue, I'm really interested and hopeful that we can be a community that thinks about transformative justice, thinks about how we can be a leader in our state, in our county, in our country, that can come together and make some changes. I did attend the meeting with the previous mayor and the police chief about policing that happened somewhat recently, and was pretty concerned and disappointed about I think the proposal was we could have one social worker on our, that worked with our police, and maybe some social work students. And I really hope that we can think beyond that and come together to think about what works for our community. I know that in the neighborhood that I live in College Heights. Everybody has an interesting neighborhood Facebook page, as do we, and there are a lot of diverse opinions, but I do know that I see a lot of folks in our neighborhood who are very quick to encourage everyone to call the police for anybody who looks like they don't belong in our neighborhood. And luckily that gets shut down pretty quickly, but I am concerned about living amongst folks who have that viewpoint. And what that means for members of our community. And so I hope that we can, and I'd love to be a part of thinking about how do we make some changes? How do we come together as a community to have conversations about the different ways that we come to think about safety and justice and our police force, and how we can reallocate our resources to really live into a more just system that works for us. And so I don't know that necessarily means quick answers, but it might mean some like really deep visioning. And I hope that that's something that we might consider as a community.
Thank you so much. Do you have any specifics or more about the conversation for deep visioning?
I think, so I am involved in my work in really thinking about how to embody a transformative justice approach. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to not rush immediately to actions, to just really learn about it and consider it. I work at the University of Michigan, so we're a part of a giant organization. But what can we do in our office to change some of those? And so I think there might be some parallels to being a city that's a part of a really large system that we know is rooted in racism and many other isms. And we have to follow some federal rules and county rules and state rules. But so I don't think I have a next step. I don't think my thought is that we just, pass it off and say, oh, that's a nice thing to think about. But I also don't know that the answer is to move directly to action items, a list of action items. So that's my, my starting to get informed thoughts about that, and hoping that others might be interested in that as well.
Thanks so much. Allison? I think you're still.
Okay. Sorry. So this is gonna sound like a very millennial comment, which I know the irony of that being this meaning, but like I think that, and I know we're talking about serious policing stuff, but I do think it's relevant. There used to be like a lot of like queer spaces in Ypsilanti for like people of all races, and just like people who were like queer or not queer, just to like hang out in particular, like the basement of Bonacera, or what used to be Bonacera. And like, I live in a very like mixed neighborhood of people, and like we used to see tons of people from my neighborhood in that basement chilling, like gay people, straight people, black people, white people. And there's not as much as that anymore since that basement is used as a pinball place or anything. And there's definitely not as many queer spaces and everything. And I think that it just would be really good for the community just to drink together. So I want to just echo what Tony said a bit at the beginning about having where 734 is, because that's another place that is like that, like where people can drink together. It's a good safe space for queer people. It's a really fun place, and I would like Ypsi to be like kind of that place where everyone is just a good community place. So it's kind of sad we lost that with Bonacera, but I think that would do a lot for the community and bringing the community together. So I do think it's maybe relevant. I don't know, but I think it's maybe a step in the right direction.
Everything is relevant.
Okay. It does seem less serious. Like we should drink together, but like yeah. And then
I appreciate that. Talking about like spaces, right? And I know that's something that comes up often.
Yeah, and now that the out bar is gone, I think that it's even more important that Ypsi creates a space for queer people as a queer person. I feel like it's really important to create space for queer people, because I think sometimes millennials have the false perception that, you know, it does, like, you know, being queer it's like whatever now, like people don't care. But like I remember it being like a thing and being sad about being queer. So like I think we still need those spaces because it's still in my memory, and I know I still need those spaces. So I think that if Ypsi could, you know, bring back those spaces or have more of them, that'd be cool.
Great, thank you.
That's all I wanted to say.
Latricia?
Hi, yeah, I am Latricia. Pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I have a question, or I guess maybe a concern about so I live in it. I do, Ypsi is my home, maybe 4 years. But I have a question or a concern about the police abolitionist movement and like the kind of the conversation that's being had within our community. And I should say, I feel like this applies to many communities and not just Ypsi, but of course I have particular concern for it in Ypsi since this is my home. I just want to assert, this is not like a response to anyone here in that sense, but I want to assert the credibility of the notion of abolishing police. I think that some people, particularly from either one, folks who traditionally experience societal benefits of policing, or two, folks who just often generationally haven't had the kind of opportunities to imagine a world without police in the way that we experience it now, that sometimes it makes it feel as if those folks can make it feel as if it's unrealistic or silly or potentially like anarchy to imagine a world without police the way that we have it now. So I just wanted to push back on that, even if it's not like vocalized in this space at all. I wanted to vocalize that here. And if I can be honest, I have heard some commentary from previous Ypsi City Council meetings about the abolition of police that I have found concerning and potentially dismissive about the plausibility of police abolition and prison reform, even just locally within our town. And I would love for the era of Ypsi that we're in to be one where we can dream and be structurally imaginative as we consider other ways to move forward. So yeah, that's my only question, concern, or statement.
I really appreciate you bringing that into the space. I think that it is a generational divide a little bit, that millennials are, I wouldn't say a monolith in this matter, but tend to be more open to ideas of abolition as far as I have seen. So I'm really glad that you brought that here. It seems like Leah Mills has raised the hand, and then Allison and Patricia.
Hi, good evening. I am not a millennial, and I have been sitting very quietly trying to honor the millennial voice and perspective this evening, but I just kind of wanted to add a different lens, right? I'm hearing a lot about the policing, and so I think that there is a need for a space to be created for those that are on the South Side, for those that are, lower income, that tend not to frequent Zoom calls and various spaces such as this. They too, right, have a voice. They have a perspective on the maltreatment that may be happening within our city. And so I would just encourage, as you all continue to develop the conversations and bring these, different topics up to bear, that we identify a way to bring them a part of the conversation so that they're not left out and that things are not just continually happening to them, that they will then begin to have a voice as to, what they would also like to see take place. When we speak about, right, policing and abolition, it sounds good, right? But if we're not the ones that are living in a space of fear and danger on a continued basis, then I think that we would have a different perspective. And so it would be good to have a well-rounded view and have all voices come to the table so that good sound decision making will happen from that. So I just wanted to add that perspective.
I appreciate that, Leah. I would say that I know I'm very interested, as some folks have named, to really have that deep conversation and to really understand what that looks like, what the process looks like, and what are things that are happening and could happen and that are realistic and that help us to push to respond to the needs, and also to help to support and amplify the work that so many in our communities are doing that do promote safety and thinking about what that looks like. So I just want to agree with you that I think this is a community-wide conversation, and that it is one that where people have a lot of different perspectives, and but also we have a lot of resources and we have a lot of skills that are, I would say, untapped in the community in terms of doing some of this work as well.
Was Allison and Latricia?
I totally agree that safety is important. Like, I think that's the point of like abolishing the police for some people from a lot of perspectives. And I don't usually come with this information, but like, I'm not like a neurotypical person. I don't know if you can tell, but hopefully not always. But like, anyway, if a cop comes to my house with like the lights blaring, the sirens blaring, and like comes up to my house, that does not make me feel safer. And like the statistics of non-neurotypical people who are Black are like, that's like dangerous. So I think that like your point that you want people to be safe is super relevant. I want people to be safe too, and I think that's probably why the abolishing the police thing is what they're talking about. So instead of sending a cop into like a non-neurotypical person's house and like agitating them, just like sending a social worker who knows how to deal with people like that, is kind of what is kind of like the thesis of abolishing the police. It's just like kind of a replacement more than a abolishment. So maybe it's like not the best branding, but like I think that's more what we're talking about. So I that's what I would raise my hand to talk about with the abolish the police, is I wanted to bring up like how I would really like more non-neurotypical training for our police, because I've seen some interactions with some special needs people in Ypsilanti that have been really disturbing in my neighborhood. And I've had to like say to the police, like, that person is not neurotypical. He lives on my block and I know him, and you should not flash your lights at him and stuff like that, it's gonna agitate them and stuff like that. And they've come at me after I've tried to educate them. And I know it's not my place, but I'm trying to use my privilege to help. But I think that that's kind of where it's coming from, is like, that's not my job. And so how do we get the right people in there to do the right job?
Thank you. Travis?
Oh, Latricia also was in there somewhere.
Oh,
I had a little thing. I put my hand back down because I was like, oh, I don't know if I have anything else, but I did have one really quick comment. I'm just, maybe this is more like a macro question, but like a zoom out kind of thing. I do wonder if there's an opportunity for maybe people to sort of, or even if this maybe it's just a think tank group, but people to like identify different groups of IPSI and subgroups through which people could connect. Because I know this one is right, I'm a millennial space, but perhaps there are other spaces that could be created. I know you said that at the top, so I'm not saying that it's not there, but if there's certain categories that folks want to suggest, perhaps there can be some sort of citywide communication style that might be able to bring in other like categories of voices through different axes. I know that's something that was asked before. My question maybe is more about just like the straight up numbers. I just don't know if we all know them, and I don't have them at my disposal presently, but just how much of the city's budget is dedicated currently to policing. Does someone have that number presently?
Yes. Who remembers the exact percentage? It's about a third.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, do you have any thoughts about that?
I'm good.
I feel
I
like
think it's actually
right out of her mouth.
I believe the policing budget is the entirety of our tax base. Actually, we get more. We have more funding streams than just our tax base, but it's equivalent to our tax base, something close to that. We had Travis.
Hey, is this working?
Yes.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Can I just ask a clarifying question? I'm sorry to interrupt. I have to ask a clarifying question. Can I just put the dots together? Can I just ask? I just have to make sure I heard it right. A third of our budget is used to pay for really young police officers that have high rollover. Is that right? Is that putting it all together? What we've talked about so far?
Sounds like it.
Okay. I just wanted to put it all together in like one sentence. Sorry, go ahead.
It's all good. My name's Travis, he, him, his. I've been in IPSI for about 4 years, which isn't a long time. But I just wanted to bring up a point. I think it was Leah. I'm bad with names, so I think it was Leah who said, I think one of the points that kind of got lost was we seem to get into a role with defunding the police, which I'm behind, but still, I think her point was the IPSI people on the South Side who don't necessarily have a voice in Zoom calls or in activist meetings or in a lot of different things. I grew up fairly poor myself, and there is a point when you're there where the police are scary, but not as scary as other things that are happening to you, so you don't want them defunded necessarily. And I think those kind of people need to have a voice as well. I think that was Leia's point that kind of got mixed in the defunding the police conversation, that the people who aren't here, who are also millennials maybe, who aren't as active because they're just trying to work 3 jobs to put food on the table, also are probably the people who need the loudest voice in a conversation where we are changing security protocols.
How far south is the South Side? I just don't know where the border is. Like, what neighborhoods are considered the South Side? I'm just curious.
It's Harriet and Hamilton to the 94.
I'm from the South Side. I live in the South Side. Sorry, just for the record.
Well, it's the corner of Harriet and Hamilton heading south toward 94.
Below Michigan Avenue, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I live on
We're
the
talking
So
south
this
about
is,
side.
below Michigan Avenue.
Yeah, I live
I think,
below Michigan Avenue. Yeah.
and
I
I
think
think
we
it's
had
also,
Brian and then Leah.
yeah, I just wanted to
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to note, like, I do think it's important to say, to Travis's point, that that these conversations, this is only one conversation. This isn't the only conversation about this happening, and there are a lot of spaces where folks from the South Side are also are participating in these conversations, and I would say that any conversation would, of course, include people from across the city, and especially on the South Side.
I just want to say I am not representational of the South Side either. I'm not trying to claim that I am either. I just say am from the South Side.
I appreciate your perspective, Allison. Brian, you were next.
Yeah, so I will say that people from the South Side are here. I grew up on the South Side. I still live in Ward 1. And I see where Leah's coming from. Like, I think, and actually I see where Travis is coming from. Like, there are more pressing concerns for most of us than a Zoom call. And I would say, the thoughts of, replacing all police, I don't think that's what anyone on the South Side would want. I can't speak for everyone, but I would say most people would not want that, just because there are situations where that sort of authority is useful. Now I'm a pacifist for religious reasons, but so I'm not about the shooting and stuff. But I will say there are cases where that sort of authority is like, it's not going to come from a social worker. If you're in a really dangerous situation, if you have an abusive someone, that might not be what you need at the time. And so much would have to change at a level so far beyond the city to make that possible. I mean, there would have to be like actual mental health, like throughout the state, everywhere. There would have to be actual healthcare. Like, we can't, it's not something that a city can do effectively. And I kind of see where Travis is coming from too, with like, you're not as afraid. I can remember like the first, I grew up on Monroe Street, and the house is right across the street from St. John's Baptist Church. And I remember one afternoon I saw a guy running. He looked like an older teenager, maybe like 18, 19, running across Monroe Street, and he cut through the parking lot, and he ran down towards Perry Park. I don't know what it's actually called. That's what we call it. And he ran down there, and as he sort of was like out of my view, so there was a cop chasing him on foot. I heard a gunshot, and I have no idea what happened after that. But the weirdest thing about it now is that I was not traumatized. Like, and I'm not gonna say I was like totally desensitized, but I was like, I feel like I was like 11, 12, and I just like went about my business. So that's the kind of environment that like some of us grew up in, and it's not the way it always was down there. But I feel like people with that perspective really need to be able to weigh in more often. I really don't know what else to say about it, but I would like to see more of that included in these conversations. And I kind of do feel left out a little bit. I mean, not me personally, but I feel like there are a lot of folks with my background who are getting left out of many conversations at the city level. I mean, I'm the kind of person who I'll like force myself in. That's cool. But a lot of people aren't like that, and they have more pressing issues. And I think maybe finding a way to really reach them and get to them more often than we do is really important, not just for the policing conversation, but all of these conversations.
Leah?
Yes, I just kind of wanted to add, first of all, I'm a clinician, so I'm a social worker. So the perspective that I add is not just from being just a random person that, you know, resides within the city. It's coming from a space of conversation amidst social workers, right? And so that's one aspect of it, but then the other aspect is engaging with the people that are being more so placed at risk when we're looking at the police. And so in conversation with them, you will identify that they really want to have the police in their neighborhood due to the fear that they experience, right? When I hear Brian talk about the gunshots, some are becoming desensitized, but some are having traumatic responses that are even more great than they could ever imagine. And so if they are not at the table to be able to share what their needs are, share what their personal experiences are, then we miss a vital aspect in, you know, what we would do as far as making policy. A lot of times policy is made from a C-suite perspective where someone is looking right low, but they're sitting high. They're not living amidst the issues. And I was just kind of trying to push it out there that I know that there's a lot of different conversations that's happening, but I think it's beautiful to have the opportunity to sit in a space to speak with your elected official, right? To have a conversation where the mayor is hearing you and she's taking notes and she's going to bring that back to her colleagues. This space is, I mean, to a certain degree, like a very sacred space because it holds a lot of weight. And so when I said that I was hoping, I know that there's other conversations that's happening over at Parkside and you know, other spaces alike, maybe within church systems, wherever, just in the hood, right? Just in their neighborhood. But I think it's very much important to be able to identify a way to reach those individuals that are living amidst a lot of the issues that many of us don't have to contend with at this point, and get their perspective on what they would like to see moving forward. Although they may know, right, I may have someone within my family that may be engaging in certain types of crime, but I still need to have, right, that safety. And having a social worker come up amidst a domestic violence case that's heightened, or amidst someone that is homicidal and possible murder, they don't want to see a social worker at that time. They need to know that there's going to be someone there that can actually enforce something that will help. So I just wanted to add that perspective, that we may all be coming from different spaces, different realities in which we live, or our past experiences, but there's definitely a voice that needs to be allowed to speak, and to speak loudly in the presence of those that are able to make some sorts of change. So I appreciate being able to kind of add that and clear that part up. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like Emmett's up next. And I just want to say that we have about a half hour left. So I really want to encourage more people to bring their voice into this conversation. I see Danielle's here, Crystal Rose. Want to elevate and center millennials in particular. So please speak up. So Emmett.
Are you talking about me?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, there's two people here, and I wasn't sure if there's another Emmett on the call. This is Laurent again. I think one thing that I could see being really beneficial for the city, and I mean, just like community members to do, is to sit down and analyze which functions of the police that they need, because what I'm hearing in what folks are saying about, like, they need protection. They don't need the police. They need somebody who can de-escalate a situation and handle violent situations. That doesn't have to be a police officer. I'm not saying that, like, I don't think social workers can solve every issue, but they can also, like, social workers can be trained in de-escalation.
De-escalation.
There we go. Thank you. But even if we radically reduce the police to really focus on, you know, security and protection, that takes out people, you know, a lot of the things that end up in violence and fear for other people of like routine traffic stops and other things that don't, like, you don't need a gun to go to pull somebody over, in my opinion. I know that there are cases of violence, and it's very important to make sure that people feel protected. So maybe pulling out, like, what are the functions of the police and how can we redistribute those things? Because the police in itself is not a protection. The people who are trained in de-escalation, so sorry, de-escalation, and you know, are trained to use a weapon, that they should get more focus. So, like, that's their job. They don't have to do all of these other things, so they can be trained of, like, how do you not shoot people? Like, how do you do that? How do you bring down a situation? I hope that didn't feel like I was talking over anyone. I think it is a progression over, like, identify the function of the police and strip away the ones that, like, may have needless violence attached to them, while keeping the safety of our community involved.
Thank you.
I appreciate that comment. I just want to, and I don't know if we have maybe Gail or someone to say that, I think I heard that maybe like 70% of calls to the police are for mental health issues. So it might be off. I know Gail Wolkoff is part of the advisory, but I see some more hands. So
Danielle is next, and then Shayna.
Hi, I'm Danielle. Pronouns are she, her, and hers. I think that this maybe turns the conversation away from police and abolition, which I think is an important conversation, but it made me think that a lot of the conversations I've seen, like on social media with different millennials, are very much conversations that we see happening nationally, and people don't always know what it looks like in our specific community. I think for a lot of different reasons, including not having a very robust local media, and so, or having people who are our age that are very involved in what's going on in terms of the local government. And so I was wondering if you all could talk about, or if people can name maybe some initiatives that are happening locally around those things, because, like, I know there's police oversight committees, there are people doing stuff, but it feels like we're not hitting the sweet spot of where we want things to be locally. And at the same time, I think that when I hear the conversations that are happening nationally, we haven't yet figured out what does this look like specifically, like in Washtenaw County, in Ypsilanti. And so just wondering if people can talk about, like, what have you seen being done? What are some of the conversations that are happening? And where is there room for people to join those conversations that we know are happening now?
I don't know if there's one person that can answer all those really great questions, and so maybe we should move on the conversation. But I think that, you know, forums like these, although they are limited, as some people have brought up, and I have heard from the conversation today that there's a desire for more community participation, and I think that the mayor hosting this event was a good faith effort in trying to do that. You know, I hope to see more things like this, and maybe more accessible meetings as well, so that we could through those questions and see what is going on that could come in to hit the sweet spot. Shayna, you're next.
Yeah, I really appreciate those questions, Danielle, and I think those are really important, and certainly things that I don't know. I think that I'm definitely relying more on the conversations nationally and statewide than I feel like I am informed about Ypsi, and so I would really like, you know, if those resources exist, I would love to know about them. And Laurent, I also really appreciated your comments about looking into what the, you know, police are actually responding to and what we need in our community, and what other wraparound resources we can think about. And I also am skeptical that police as an institution can or should be reformed. So this is just another, vote for thinking about something that's outside of our current system. I'm not sure that the police as they currently exist are a place where the type of reform that we're looking for, the type of support and services that we're looking for, can or should be the place for that. I don't think we have to work with the systems that we have. I think we can think about what our community needs. And I also will say that I do feel for myself in the neighborhood that I live in, and the ways that I interact in Ypsi, which is different during a pandemic, I don't feel as connected to other parts of Ypsi, and I would love to be a part of conversations when they're appropriate across different neighborhoods and different folks experiencing different things in our community.
Brian, and then Laurent/Emmett, and then maybe we can transition to another topic after that.
Yeah, so as far as groups to get connected, other parts of town, I would say there's a meeting every Monday. Well, it's mostly anyway, there's a meeting every Monday at the Park Ridge Community Center, and it's held virtually now. So that's one resource. I think there's a link on their Facebook page. If not, if someone wants to email me somehow, I can shoot that over. But a lot of this feels like when we're talking about who police are responding to and all that kind of stuff, I feel like the number of calls for violent issues would go up if Black people in particular, and I guess probably all people of color, didn't feel like they might get shot for calling the police. You would probably see a lot more calls if people didn't have to do the sort of like Black people calculus when you have to call police or when you feel like you have to. And it's really unfortunate. And I just want some folks on this call to like understand what that's like. And I can't really tell you what that's like. So this abolishing the police and the whole like the social worker thing, it sounds to me a lot like folks who aren't in that situation, who didn't grow up in that environment. Because if you have limited interactions with the police and they're all pleasant-ish, you might feel like you could do without them. And what I want is not, it's so interesting because what I want is not like everything to be turned upside down. All I want is that when I call the police, I don't get shot. You know, what I want is that a police officer can walk up to me and treat me like he would a white person. Like, I just want to be equal. And all these things don't address that equality issue. You know, social workers and therapists and psychologists, they exhibit bias also. And there are plenty of studies about that. So that's not really a benefit to me. It doesn't solve any of the issues, I don't think, of people who live in those neighborhoods. And I feel like as a native of Ypsi, I feel like we don't have a very large voice. Like this whole thing, it always feels like this huge like gentrifying force. Like, and I know like everyone has different definitions of what that is, but a lot of these conversations feel like that to me. Even if you're not like rich or moving in or that kind of thing, like that's what this feels like. I feel like we're like pushed so far out. Like I'm the only person in this meeting, as far as I know. And it's really, I feel like we're not going to get a chance to have a say in what happens in our neighborhoods. You know, it's going to be decided by folks who like just moved here or they have like ideas from where they came from, which is fine. Like I'm sure a lot of them are good, but I feel really pushed out. Like, you know, we've been here for like, there's 6 generations of my family that in Ypsi, and I feel like I don't belong here sometimes. And I know everyone's well intentioned and I love it. I do. But that's sort of how it feels to me at times. And it's very frustrating because I still don't feel like I'm going to be able to call for help if I need it. And I still have to like do the math where I try to figure out if I'm going to get hurt myself. And none of that's going to be addressed. Like, it's not a theoretical debate for me. It's like an existential issue.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I didn't grow up in Ypsi, but I did grow up in Chicago and Cleveland, which I would, has a lot of the same challenges around gun violence, poverty, on a very large scale. And so definitely recognize a lot of those things. And I would say even with all of that, and in lots of ways because of that, because of what you respond to, the same things that drive, for me, the same things that drive the question of whether if I call the police, I'm going to get shot, are the same things that I think drive the reason that we have criminality overall. And some of the issues that we have to deal with that actually get past why we have to have police to solve an issue at the end of it, as opposed to why don't we have jobs for everyone, and why don't we have safe and affordable housing for everyone, and all these other things that are a lot of things that drive a lot of behaviors that we see acting out at the end. I am cognizant of time, and so I mean we could definitely stay on this, could definitely stay on this issue. I feel like I just want to like at least introduce the other topics just so that they're out there, and if people we don't have to feel like you have to move on at all. We can stay on this, but just so that if folks might have wanted to talk about the other pieces too, we had a focus on community assets to grow, which is all the different things we can think about within Ypsilanti. We talked about local, physical, and social infrastructure, which I think ties into the conversation we're having, as it is too, in terms of some of the social infrastructure pieces that we don't have. And then we had one more stat. I don't know if you want to share it, Amber. I highlighted it.
Sure. One last millennial stat for the conversation. So, the millennial generation is the most studied generation of all, apparently. And so we've been analyzed in many ways. We are known for our student debt and having higher rates of depression, but we are also known for our love of the internet, travel, reading, healing industries, activism, and unionizing. Looks like Emmett / Laurent has their hand up.
Hi, sorry for taking up so much airtime, and I really appreciate the space. I was actually just wondering if folks who are more connected to the city can recommend where we should look to for news, because definitely as somebody who grew up with the internet and also moved here because of EMU and then falling in love with Ypsi, and then oops, I learned what gentrification was, which is a situation that I think a lot of my friends are in. Well, we get a lot of our news from the internet, and we have a lot of our conversations going like nationally, which I think is really important and powerful. But if there are specific news sources anybody would recommend for us, bonus points if they're digital and like on social media, but also just like newspapers, sometimes figuring out who to listen to and like who's just like gonna give us the best information is difficult to find, at least in my eyes. So like, yeah, any recommendations of like who we should be following or reading or anything like that, so we can feel more connected to Ypsi.
Any suggestions before we go to Allison?
Have to do a shout out for What's Left Ypsi, right? So what's left Ypsi.com. I also would do a shout out for Ipsy Can I Share. Both of those are online.
The EMU Echo has been doing some pretty good work, and I know that they're financially strained at this moment, so that might be a good spot to support right now. There's various bloggers and of course the Facebook discussion groups, but it is really a challenge here in Ipsy. I think obviously MLive has a section for us, but that's criticized a lot, and Concentrate also has some, I think, legitimate criticisms around them, but they do coverage in the area. So there are some emerging outlets. So definitely pay attention to what's out there and, contribute if you can. Allison?
I was just like wondering what in particular you can do around here to try to make it so that more people from this area can participate, because when I asked my neighbors if they were gonna come to this, because I have a lot of neighbors around here that are millennials, they're like, why? Because it's like not gonna do anything and I got shit to do. So that was definitely echoed. Like somebody said that before. And so like I think like people are definitely more attracted to like a community event, and there's not a lot of that. So I don't know how to make that happen, but I do think that people feel like so disenfranchised at this point that nobody says like feels a point of even saying anything at this point. So I can definitely understand what people were saying earlier, and I want to help somehow, but I don't know how. So I guess I want like some way to be able to make it so that people around me feels like they can participate. I don't know how to do that though. So I guess I wanted to ask a question, how do you do that? Or if anybody had any ideas.
I think it's a really good question. Does anybody have a response, Allison?
Hey, it's Laurent again. I think I definitely echo like a lot of people in our generation don't trust institutions, and at this point that includes basically anything that like they can't directly control, for some very good reasons. I think like a first step is the city, if they want folks to participate in this, is showing up and being like, these are the changes we're making, these are the things that we heard. And I know there's always a difference between what the people want and like how fast bureaucracy can work, but I think that we're often waiting for like large statements and movements, and we get frustrated waiting for that. We're feeling like people aren't listening to us, and then we move on, because if we just go to like 1,000 Zoom meetings and nothing moves, like why would go to the 1,000th first?
That makes the meetings very ironically named.
It's really relatable. I think that it's also reflected in participation, locally and electorally. Millennials might have more skepticism towards what the value of that participation is. And so, yeah, I am wondering too how that might impact how things change. If we are going to keep kind of the similar systems that we have of representative democracy, or if it might shift because of, the pretty strong skepticism among our generation. And it's actually one of the things we wrote down on there to discuss. So if anybody else has thoughts about electoral politics or, activism in the locally and which is more effective, please feel free.
So it's also 8:30, and so I just want to open the space for any closing thoughts too, before we close out.
Oh, I see one hand. Renee? Renee Eccles?
I think you are still muted, Renee.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just going to respond to a couple of things. I didn't want to talk very much because of I'm 2 years outside of the millennial age group, so I didn't want to keep other people from speaking. I just wanted to respond to a couple of issues that have come up. First of all, with regard to just kind of the issues that came up in what Brian was saying, and some other people. I guess I would, the policing issue is a really complicated issue, and I think it's really easy to make it into this binary of, defund the police or reform the police, and I think it, as we've just seen, people have a lot of different complicated perspectives and feelings about it. So we do have a police advisory commission. And so I think anyone who has thoughts about it, there's always public comment on those, public participation in those meetings. I've listened to the past two, and there hasn't been a lot of audience participation. So I just really encourage anyone who can to come to those. I believe the next one is August 27th. There's, there can be different debates about how effective that body is. I'm not really sure. But I mean, if people want their voices to be heard about their experiences with the police, there are places where you can be heard. So please, come and voice your experiences. And then the other thing I wanted to say was, Brian was talking about social workers, and I think it's really easy for privileged, mostly white, able-bodied people to say, "Oh, just put in a social worker," and a lot of times these are people who don't know, who haven't experienced having to be visited by a social worker or be approached by a social worker as a marginalized person, or who have had to apply to social workers. A lot of times people, and don't get me wrong, I have an MSW myself. There's a lot of people doing great work in social work. But a lot of times it's the social workers who are the gatekeepers for disabled people, for poor people. So they're gatekeepers. They're oftentimes the people who come in and take people's kids away. So it's not as if like social workers are somehow this benevolent entity that are free of state power and state surveillance. So the idea that we're just going to put in a social worker and everyone's problems are going to be solved, I think is really naive. And at the same time, though, I want to acknowledge, Allison's point that a lot of the victims of police violence are also people who have cognitive and various other kinds of disabilities. So it's a complicated issue, but I hear so many times this social worker as a problem solving solution. And Like I'm a person who has used social workers. I've applied for food stamps. I've had social workers come to my house. You know, the social workers are not the answer to everything. They cause as many problems as they solve. And I do think there are some wonderful social workers out there, but I just think it's kind of coming from a privileged position to just say, send in a social worker to solve someone's problems. And I think that goes to Desiree's point about we need to have better structures, you know, better ways for people to get jobs so they can support themselves, better safety nets so those people who aren't able to participate in the labor market are not homeless and without food. So that's all I want to say. I'm talking for too long. Thank you.
No, thanks for all that. So yeah, I think if there's not anything else, then we could go ahead and close out the call. I know I just want to just show appreciation for all of you coming out tonight, and you know, for those of you who shared your thoughts and ideas and concerns, much appreciation, and thanks for everyone for joining us to listen in. And I, you know, this is an ongoing conversation, I think, as you know, we've said, but and to think about how some of these issues impact millennials deeply, and that participation question, I think, is huge. I want to see if Amber wants to say something, and I definitely want to give Mayor Richardson an opportunity to maybe let folks know, like, some contact info or something for if they want to follow up with you directly.
Yeah, I just want to also thank everyone and just say that, you know, I did hear, the sentiments about what happens after these meetings, and right, we're all wondering that in some way. And I do want to say, as someone that has participated with engaging the local government, you do have, there are avenues for engaging the government. It's not easy. I won't say it's easy. It's actually designed to disempower people, and that's one thing we need to maybe change. But in Ypsilanti, we have seen a lot of change, and so to respond to that, I think as a start, we'll definitely share out the notes that we took tonight so that people can review it and see what the next conversation should be from this. And, hopefully we can gain some insight about what the next steps are and what, people in town that are from our generation want to do and move towards that. And I think maybe the only other thing is that, there are avenues for getting involved in the local government as well. There's plenty of open seats on city commission. So if that's something you're interested in, you can contact us. You can contact City Council, Mayor Lois Richardson. There are avenues to participate them and improve them all the time, but they are there. Thank you.
And I just want to thank everyone for coming. I looked at one point, I think there were 39 participants. I want to say that I really appreciate you taking out time, coming and sharing. And I too was taking notes here. And my information is, if anyone that wants to reach out to me, you can reach me at my phone number is 734-972-3673. And my city email is lrichardson@city of Ypsilanti, and that is all lowercase. The name and the city of Ypsilanti is all lowercase. But again, I want to say thank you. I learned a lot tonight just listening. And some of you, if you want to reach out to me, I would love to talk to you about some of the things and ideas and some of the conversation that you had tonight. I don't believe this will be the last one of these that we will have. I believe that like for us to have more of these so that I can continue to hear, and that we can work through some of the ideas and some of the things that were presented tonight, even some of the issues and some of the semi-problems that people were having, so that we can come to work through them, not just hang them up. I, too, in another life, was a social worker, not an MSW, but a BSW. And so I think it was Renee at the end said social workers do not answer all situations, do not answer all problems. And sometimes she said we create more problems than we solve. And that is true, because we're bound by the law, and the law is not always on the side of the person that's having the problem. So thanks again, and a special, special thanks to Amber and to Desiree. Thank you so much for saying yes when I called and asked you to do this. You never hesitated. You both were very gracious and agreed to do it. And I know that both of you are very busy young ladies, so a special, special thanks to you for taking time out of your busy schedule and handling this tonight. You did an excellent job. I really am proud of both of you and how you did it. And thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want to say thank you to Councilmember Steve Wilcoxon and his wife, Gail Walkoff. And I'm not sure, I tried to look through to see if I saw any other council people here. I don't know that I saw any other commission people here either. But if you're here and I didn't recognize you, it's just because I didn't recognize you as a commission person. So thank you to everyone. I know that we're over a little bit, and I am always try to be very cognizant of people's time. So thank you, and have a wonderful night and a good tomorrow.
Mayor Richardson, Renee is now a council member. I'm not, not a council, police commissioner.
Okay, thank you. I kind of thought that, but I wasn't sure, so I didn't want to say that. Thanks, Renee, for being here. And thanks for serving on the commission. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay, if not, everyone have a good night.
Thank
Bye
you all. Thank you so much.